On July 28th, the UFC is going to Calgary and bringing one of the most stacked non-pay-per-view cards I've seen in a while. I mean, there's 3 former champions on the main card, and the main event is a Fight of the Year contender for sure. Some interesting backstory to this event. 6 years ago, the UFC also went to Calgary for UFC 149, and Dana White considered it one of the worst cards he'd ever put on, and he promised that if he ever went back to Calgary, he'd bring an amazing card, and on paper, it looks like he's going to fulfill that promise. I mean, I've been excited about this one for a long time. Before I get into these predictions, I just want to say you guys should follow me on Twitter. It's just a really convenient way for me to voice my opinion on things without having to make an entire video about it. And I'm open to having discourse with you guys as well. So if you've got a question, or you're wondering my opinion on something, or you even have a video idea or something like that, feel free to send me a tweet. But that's enough self-advertising for me right now. Without any further ado, let's get right into these predictions. For the first fight on the Fox prelims, we have Gadzhimurad Antigulov versus Ion Cutelaba. This is a classic grappler versus striker matchup. Gadzhimurad is going to be doing whatever he can to get the fight on the ground. He's won both of his UFC fights by submission. And Ion Cutelaba is definitely going to try to keep the fight on the feet because that's where his advantages lie. Just a little side note, Gadzhimurad has only had 2 UFC fights, but he's already a top 15 light heavyweight, so that just shows how shallow the division actually is. So, in my opinion, wherever this fight goes is going to determine who wins. If Gadzhimurad can actually get the takedowns, I do think he has a high chance of submitting Ion Cutelaba. But I think if Gadzhimurad can't get the takedown and this fight stays on the feet, it's almost a guaranteed win for Ion Cutelaba, just because he has all the physical advantages. As you can see, just based on their pictures, he's a lot more muscular and he's taller and has a longer reach. But the only thing about Ion is he is coming off of a USADA suspension. I think it was only a year. But I'm actually not sure how much that's going to affect him. You can't really put trust into that because apparently he was on performance-enhancing drugs and now he's not. So that's obviously going to affect him a little bit, even if it's just mentally. To be fair, Gadzhimurad's past 2 opponents were not on the same level as Ion Cutelaba, and I think this is going to be his toughest UFC fight yet. Based on Ion's takedown defense, he's defended 80% of his takedowns. I do think there's a high chance he will be able to stuff the takedowns, and like I said earlier, if he can do that and keep the fight on the feet, I think it's almost a guaranteed win for him. I'm not really that confident in this fight just because I think if it goes to the ground, Ion has a good chance to get submitted and all the USADA stuff, but my prediction is going to be Cutelaba by decision just because he has such an advantage on the feet. I think he's going to be able to land some big shots. He obviously is a better striker than Antigulov, and I think based on his takedown defense and the fact that he's a much better opponent than Antigulov has faced in the past, I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns and get the decision. So my prediction is Cutelaba by decision. Next up, we have Canadian Kajan Johnson, who's on a 4-fight win streak, versus Islam Makhachev, who's 15-1, fighting out of Dagestan. Right off the bat, MMA math would say that Kajan Johnson knocks out Islam, just because Kajan knocked out Adriano Martins, who knocked out Islam. But as we all know, MMA math does not work at all. And in Islam's last fight against Gleison Tibau, he looked flawless. I mean, he went out there and starched Gleison in the first round. And in Kajan's last fight against Stevie Ray, it went to decision. It was a split decision. He got the victory, but I really don't think he won that fight at all. Comparing how I see both of these guys, Islam to me is younger. His best days are ahead of him, and he has a really bright future in the division. But Kajan is a guy that's getting pretty old, and his best days are just behind him, and he's just starting to slow down. I think standing, these guys are pretty even. Kajan has been knocked out a handful of times, and Islam's been knocked out once, but Islam gets hit a lot less than Kajan does. Kajan does have a tendency to absorb a lot of shots and get dropped, but I don't really think this fight is going to stay on the feet. Obviously, being from Dagestan, Islam Makhachev has a huge advantage on the ground. He usually gets like 4 or 5 takedowns per fight, and he has defended 100% of his takedowns. Kajan Johnson does have a pretty high takedown defense, but I don't think he's going to be able to avoid these takedowns. I think throughout the rounds, he's going to get taken down. It's going to start out on the feet. Maybe it's back and forth, then he gets taken down and possibly submitted. But I think since Islam has such a huge advantage on the ground, he will be able to get the finish. So my prediction is Islam by submission. Next up, we have the gimme fight of the card. This is the one where the matchmakers are just trying to build up a prospect. and that prospect is Hakeem Dawodu. He's a Canadian fighter. He's actually not 7-0. He recently had his UFC debut. Based on how much hype was behind him before his debut, he probably had one of the worst performances I've ever seen. He managed to get knocked out and submitted all within the first 30 seconds of the first round against Danny Henry. But the matchmakers know what they're doing. They know he's in Canada and they're trying to build him up because this is the age of if a guy can hit hard, we put all of our promotion skills behind him. So they pick Austin Arnett, who was on the Contender Series, which usually means if you get a win on the Contender Series, you have a chance to be in the UFC. Well, he didn't even win his Contender Series fight, but he still got a contract. He literally got beat up, but since he survived to a decision, they gave him a contract. And then in his UFC debut, Austin Arnett fought Corey Sandhagen and was taken out with a body punch. So trust me, the UFC matchmakers, they know what they're doing with this fight. They know they're in Canada and they want to have Hakeem put on a great performance for the fans, and they're trying to build him up. So just solely based on that, I would pick Hakeem. But if you want to add stats in there, Hakeem is extremely accurate with his shots. He's a good like Muay Thai type striker. And Austin Arnett, he's a gritty, tough guy. I will give him that. He's really, really tough, and he can survive in there. But he gets hit way too easy, and I think he's going to get knocked out. I think Hakeem is either going to win by decision or knockout. To be honest, I don't really think either one of these guys are UFC caliber fighters. I'm actually going to be pulling for Austin Arnett just because I think it's hilarious when the UFC matchmakers have some like surefire outcome they want to happen and then it doesn't. I think Austin does have a chance to win, probably more than most people are going to think, because I'm assuming that Hakeem is going to be the huge favorite. If Austin can get the takedown, he might be able to get a submission just because Hakeem is apparently really green on the ground, but I just think he's going to get picked apart on the feet. So my prediction is Hakeem by either a dominant decision or knockout. For the Fox Prelims headliner, we have Jordan Mein versus Alex Morono. Jordan was on a 3-fight losing streak, and during that period of time, he retired, but he came back and got a victory over Eric Silva in his last fight by unanimous decision. That doesn't really mean that much to me because Eric Silva isn't that good of a fighter. I mean, he recently won his LFA fight, but he got dropped and almost finished by an LFA caliber fighter. So Jordan's victory over him doesn't really add that much stock to Jordan's name. Alex is arguably coming off the greatest win of his career. He submitted Joshua Berkman in the first round, and he looks pretty sharp. These guys are actually pretty similar. I would say that they're just average welterweight fighters who aren't really ever going to move up the rankings. They're just kind of there. Jordan is Canadian, so that would make you think that the matchmakers kind of cherry-picked an opponent for him to beat in Canada, but I actually do think Alex Morono is going to win this fight. Alex is younger, hungrier, and he hits pretty hard, and he's on the rise in his career, while I'd say Jordan is on the decline and probably got the last victory he's going to get in the UFC when he fought Eric Silva. So I have Alex Morono by decision. He does hit hard, but I don't think he's going to get the knockout. I think it'll just be an average fight, and he'll get the nod. Jordan probably could drop Alex because Alex has been dropped multiple times in fights, even fights he's won. But I don't really think he's going to get the knockout. I think the knockout's probably the only way Jordan would win, but at this point, I have Alex Morono winning by decision. For the first fight on the main card, we have the return of Alexander the Great Hernandez, coming off of his huge upset knockout victory over Beneil Dariush versus Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who's coming off of his TKO of Evan Dunham. Both of these guys are on the rise. Ironically, Alex has only had one fight in the UFC, but he's already ranked top 15, and Olivier's had, I think, probably 5 or 6 victories, and he's not ranked yet. In this matchup, in terms of Alex, we don't really have that much to go off of because his UFC career consisted of him throwing a heavy side kick to the body and then landing a big punch. I mean, that was how he got his last win. So we've definitely seen a lot more of Olivier, but Alex's base is in wrestling, and based on his other career wins, it seems like he's very well-rounded. He's beaten quality people. So I think this is going to be a pretty tough fight for Olivier. To put things in perspective a little bit on Alex, he's only had one loss in his career, and it was in 2013 to Jamal Emmers. Jamal Emmers recently got knocked out on the Contender Series by Julian Erosa. Again, MMA math doesn't work, but that just should put things in perspective a little bit more easily for you. Alex has the clear power advantage. Olivier doesn't really knock people out. In fact, his last TKO win over Evan Dunham was very surprising. So Alex has the clear power and striking advantage in this fight already. But I think we're going to see a classic Quebec kid performance where he just gets the takedown and either lays and prays or gets the submission. Alex is a wrestler too, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns. I don't really have anything to go off of that would say that he can. But at this point, I do think Olivier Aubin-Mercier is going to get the victory. He's probably just going to get a whole bunch of takedowns, lay on top of Alex, and maybe get a submission, and then that'll be the end of it, which I think is pretty unfortunate because Alex has a lot of potential. I feel like if they would have just matched him up with a couple more, more manageable fights, he could get maybe some more knockouts, some impressive decisions, and be up there into the rankings because he's a very charismatic kid. And I'm just wondering, have you guys ever seen that movie We're the Millers? I don't know if you have or not, but Alex really looks like the son off that movie. But yeah, sadly, in my opinion, I think Olivier is going to get the boring decision or submission victory here, just because we know what he's going to do. It's been his style the whole time, and very few guys have been able to stop that. So if Alex can't stuff his takedowns, then he's going to lose. So my prediction here is Olivier by boring decision or submission. Next up on the main card, we have the former female strawweight champion and current #1 contender, Joanna Jedrzejcyk, taking on Tecia, the Tiny Tornado Torres. For me, it's really weird to see Joanna in a non-title fight, but I think we're going to see her back fighting for gold soon. Personally, I think this is going to be a really good rebound win for Joanna. Tecia Torres is the textbook definition of a decision fighter, and I think that's really going to play into Joanna's style very well. Joanna has really good takedown defense, so I'm not worried about Tecia getting the takedown. And in terms of the striking, Joanna has the clear advantage. Joanna's jab pretty much has beaten every person she's fought so far, and I don't think Tecia's going to be any different than that. I think Joanna's going to keep her on the outside, sticking her with jabs and front kicks, and she will probably get the decision nod. Tecia's last fight against Jessica Andrade, it wasn't really that great of a performance. I mean, Jessica's a monster. She's a killer for sure, but Tecia over the years hasn't really shown anything new. She's just pretty much just the same decision fighter. And so Joanna definitely knows what she has to go in there and do. I think this fight's going to be a lot like maybe, I don't know, maybe even the Jessica Andrade fight. Joanna stuffing takedowns and piecing her up from the outside. But with this one, I'm very confident in Joanna to get the decision victory. So maybe not too much analysis for this one, but I think since Tecia is 100% a decision fighter, that's going to play into Joanna's strength, so I have Joanna winning by decision. For the co-main event, we have former featherweight champion Jose Aldo and current #2 contender versus the streaking Jeremy Stephens, who's completely evolved and has looked amazing in his last 3 fights. I'd like to take a quick moment to apologize to Jeremy Stephens. In my last prediction video that he was featured in when he fought Josh Emmett in the main event, I said that Jeremy actually wasn't the hardest hitting 145 and Josh hits way harder and Josh would probably get the knockout. Needless to say, what actually took place, first of all, shocked me and scared me, and it definitely proved me wrong. So, Jeremy, you are the hardest hitting 145, and I mean that. And in this fight against mentally broken Jose Aldo, who hasn't looked the same since he got decimated by Conor, and has 2 back-to-back wars with Max that definitely gave him some brain damage, I think you know what I'm about to say. Jeremy, I don't know what happened. I think he just got a lot more patient, wasn't like headhunting as much, and just tries to place his shots with more precision. And he has the power, so that's definitely worked out a lot more for him. Jeremy Stephens might even give Jose Aldo a run for his money with the leg kicks, because when Jeremy fought Gilbert Melendez, I mean, he tore that leg up. I don't think Gilbert's leg will ever be the same again from those leg kicks. So, guys, I think this one's going to stay 100% on the feet. And basically, if you stand and bang with Jeremy Stephens, you get brutally knocked out. So based on Jose's most recent performances, like against Max, he's been eating shots way too easily. His defense has not been good at all. And based on Jeremy's last performances, he's pretty much a brand new fighter who has grown into his style and hits with a lot more, precision, accuracy, and knows when to pull the trigger. So I think we got Jose on the decline and Jeremy on the rise. So with this one, I'm going to say Jeremy Stephens by early knockout. I think it'll maybe even like second round. Jeremy's just going to catch him, hurt him bad, and then follow up with probably some vicious elbows or something like he did to Josh Emmett. You guys know he did some serious damage to Josh, right? Like Josh had to have emergency surgery and his eye was going to come out of his head or almost lost his vision or something like that.
So I think, and Jeremy's been coming out in the media saying that he's going to kill Jose in this fight. I know you can't really go off of what guys say, but he definitely has the tools to back it up. So my prediction here is Jeremy Stephens by second round knockout. And finally, for the main event, we have the much anticipated rematch of Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. Their first fight ended in a no contest when Eddie landed an illegal knee. And let me go ahead and say this right now. I think I might have said this before, but I think that knee was 100% intentional. I think Eddie knew that he was getting pieced up and hurt, and he probably wasn't going to win the fight, so he just landed the knee because he knew he could say that, it would get stopped and it would be a no contest instead of a loss for him. So I guess it was smart because it stopped him from getting the loss. But anyway, I don't want to sit here and try to act like some fighter's a horrible person or dirty or anything because of a decision they made during the fight. But this rematch, I'm actually really glad it happened. They've pretty much been talking back and forth on social media since that fight. It's actually funny because in the cage after the fight, who said what? I think Dustin was like, "Hey, don't boo this man," because the whole arena was booing Eddie Alvarez, and they seemed like really respectful. But then like an hour later on social media, they were like, "Yeah, you would have lost. No, you would have lost." And then pretty much it's been the same thing ever since. They've just been going back and forth, and Dustin's called Eddie out, I think, after 2 of his fights since then, and Eddie's pretty much been on silent mode. But with these 2 guys, you've got some fighters that are willing to take 3 just to give 1 good punch. They get hit a lot. They've both been knocked out multiple times, and they had a pretty similar performance against a common opponent. They both fought Justin Gaethje, and they both pretty much won in the same way. They just outlasted the onslaught and then got the knockout late in the fight. Although I will say Eddie got the knockout with a knee. I think Eddie was actually losing on the feet to Justin. Justin was pretty much piecing him up. I think he might he broke Eddie's jaw or something and was tearing Eddie's leg up. And then Eddie got the knee, but Dustin was able to finish Justin with punches, which I think holds true to the fact that Dustin has better boxing than Eddie and better striking all around. So Eddie got the knockout against Justin earlier and in the 3rd round, but Dustin got it, I think, more convincingly in the 4th. And I think Dustin took less damage against Justin than Eddie took. Eddie looked horrible after that fight. But you got to give them props. They both beat a really, really tough opponent. They're both really tough guys themselves. They can take a lot of shots and come back. I think this fight's going to play out a lot like their first fight, their first matchup, just because these guys, I'd honestly say that Dustin's gotten better than Eddie. Eddie pretty much has looked the same in his fights since then. Dustin's looked a lot better. He's been a lot more patient. But I think pretty much the same thing's going to happen. Dustin's going to use his crisper, cleaner boxing, probably catch Eddie with his shot, hurt him, and this time he'll be able to put him out. And if not, and if this goes deep in the fight, I see Dustin getting the knockout in like the 4th round like he did against Justin. Dustin's got the longer reach, better striking, he absorbs less punishment, and he dishes out a lot of punches per minute. He lands a lot of clean punches per minute. While Eddie, he lands a lot per minute as well, but not as much as Dustin, and he eats a lot of shots. So I think this is going to happen like the first round in the last fight where Eddie ate a big left hook and was wobbled like crazy. But I think this time Dustin's going to be able to, finish it and put him away. So my prediction is Dustin Poirier by 4th round knockout.